Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, September 23rd. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amitha Sharma in for Maya Trabulsi. Anguish and frustration now giving way to protest. This as supporters of Breonna Taylor say justice was not served in her death. You were looking at a live picture of the courthouse in downtown San Diego, the first of two demonstrations just getting underway, people now beginning to arrive. From Louisville, Kentucky to other cities nationwide, similar protests are taking place. This all stems from an officer being indicted in Taylor's case 6 months after her death at the hands of police executing a warrant. But the Kentucky Attorney General's decision to only level charges against one of the officers involved is not the outcome many were hoping for. Here's Daryl Forges.
After months of mounting pressure, a grand jury has announced 3 charges of wanton endangerment against Brett Hankinson, one of the officers involved in the March shooting death of Breonna Taylor.
The grand jury voted to return an indictment against Detective Hankinson for 3 counts of wanton endangerment for wantonly placing the 3 individuals in apartment 3 in danger of serious physical injury or death. The charge of wanton endangerment in the first degree is a Class D felony, and if found guilty, the accused can serve up to 5 years for each count.
Hankinson, fired from the force in June, is one of the 3 officers investigated by the Attorney General, but is the only officer who has been indicted by a grand jury. For those fighting for justice, these charges may not be enough. The decision comes on the heels of a historic wrongful death lawsuit settlement. The city of Louisville agreeing to both pay $12 million to the family of Breonna Taylor and institute sweeping police reforms.
It is landmark in its scope.
The 26-year-old EMT and aspiring nurse was killed back on March 13th when Louisville Metro Police executed a late-night warrant in a narcotics investigation. Taylor's death at the hands of police adding to the resounding calls for justice and accountability. Taylor's mother vows to fight until justice is done for her daughter.
I'll fight to the death of me for her.
In Louisville, Kentucky, I'm Daryl Forges reporting.
A milestone to report when it comes to the coronavirus in San Diego County. Health officials say we've surpassed 1 million local tests. Also, just one day after learning we are staying in the red tier 2 for now, cases ticked up slightly, 278 new ones along with 2 deaths. KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento has the latest.
COVID is number 6 on this year's top causes of death in San Diego County.
It's just now edging out chronic lower respiratory disease.
The county's Dr. Eric McDonald says that trend will likely continue.
That's really quite concerning. It's actually rapidly rising on accidents, and I would not be surprised if it comes into the top 4 by the end of the year.
The grim news comes just as San Diego County narrowly avoided restrictions on businesses because COVID spread was on the higher end. The county's case rate just met the state's second most restrictive level of red. The measurement was just below the threshold that could have put us in the purple level, which is the most restrictive. That brought relief to businesses, but Supervisor Greg Cox warned it'll only last as long as the public takes precautions.
The reality is we remain at risk of being moved to that more restrictive tier in the future if we don't continue to do those things that we know that we need to do.
Those actions are hand washing, wearing face coverings, avoiding gatherings, and staying 6 feet away. Still, County Public Health Officer Dr. Wilma Wooten says she's pushing the state on how it determines any new closures.
There are three things that we feel, and not just myself as the health officer for San Diego County, but other health officers across the state, utilizing if counties are maintaining that hospitalization and hospital capacity to somehow get credit for that, and also to get credit for contact tracing.
Wooten is scheduled to give the Board of Supervisors an update next week. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
The Latino community has been known to be disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne spoke to a family that lost a loved one to the disease and now faces the future with economic uncertainty.
Angelico Maldonado died on August 22nd from damages left behind by COVID-19. He spent 6 weeks on a ventilator before having to be disconnected. He was undocumented and uninsured when the pandemic hit. He was also the main breadwinner for his family, now leaving them in financial distress.
My father was 68 years old. Retirement was not an option, at least not for him. He lived with my mom majorly, so of course he was the bigger income there.
Originally from Oaxaca, Mexico, Maldonado came to the U.S. 35 years ago and spent over 25 years in the roofing industry in San Diego. Before being hospitalized, Maldonado feared the cost of medical care and being deported if seeking help, a fear that lives in many Latinos today.
My dad didn't have insurance, so of course he couldn't call his doctor and say, hey, what do? I have fever. I've been having fever for so long, and that wasn't an option that he had.
Neither was working from home. Maldonado continued going to work during the COVID restrictions as roofing jobs got busier. For many Latinos, working from home is a luxury that they don't have or simply can't afford. These are the types of cases that Chicano Federation often sees when helping families navigate the burdens of the pandemic.
And we see that every day. We talk to folks who are these essential workers who say, I'm sorry, but I have no choice. If I don't work today, I might not be able to pay rent tomorrow.
Alcantar says other factors driving the COVID cases up in the Latino community are the underlying health conditions and lack of access to health care. Latinos also frequent public transportation more and live in multi-generational households. As a roofer, Maldonado frequently interacted with many different people. He was diabetic, had no access to health care, and lived with his wife, children, and grandchildren. All of these elements made him more susceptible to catching COVID-19.
There's been absolutely no help for our undocumented families in our community who contribute greatly to our local economy, contribute greatly to our society as a whole, and yet they've been excluded from this help.
In July, when Maldonado, his wife, and several family members were diagnosed with COVID-19, they were left to pay out of pocket to see a doctor and get tested due to having no insurance. That is when the financial stress began for the Maldonado family. After diagnosis, everyone with COVID was forced to go into quarantine.
Again, when we got COVID, we were out of work for a whole month. This was definitely not something we were planning to go through.
Maldonado's wife, Maria de Los Angeles, is a legal U.S. resident working on Camp Pendleton. She and her husband plan to return to Oaxaca in January to retire. Plans that have now changed, forcing Angeles to depend on her children for financial support.
Después de tanto tiempo de estar trabajando aquí.
She said, it's a shame. After all these years of working here, we have nothing built here.
Nada.
While Maldonado was approved for emergency Medi-Cal, the family still hasn't seen a final hospital bill.
Nosotros como familias latinas.
She said, Latino families like us live day by day just to pay rent, pay bills. We don't have enough left over to save money. Now for me, it's going to be more difficult because my partner is gone. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
This story was produced with support from the journalism nonprofit Economic Hardship Reporting Project. A rock star, a fighter, a winner. That's how Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts described his colleague Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The late justice is lying in repose at the Supreme Court. Here's Camila Bernal.
For the final time, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg returning to the Supreme Court.
Among the words that best describe Ruth, tough, brave, a fighter, a winner, but also thoughtful, careful, compassionate, honest.
An army of more than 100 of her former clerks stood watch over her casket, some taking it up the stone steps leading to the Great Hall, where the liberal icon presided for almost 30 years.
She will live on in what she did to improve the law and the lives of all of us. And yet, still, Ruth is gone, and we grieve.
Politicians and the public paying their respects.
She was a fighter for all women.
But on Capitol Hill, Republicans quickly working to fill Justice Ginsburg's seat before the election, and Democrats already vowing retaliation.
Everything is on the table.
This is a gigantic mistake and abuse of power.
Senators are strategizing over the open Supreme Court seat and pondering the person President Trump may pick.
The president's put forward a list of incredibly talented potential nominees, including Indiana's own judge, Amy Coney Barrett.
We have not had a Supreme Court justice from Florida. Barbara Lagoa is a qualified jurist.
The president will be at the Supreme Court Thursday, paying tribute to the legendary life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In Washington, I'm Camila Bernal.
A PBS NewsHour special, RBG, Her Legacy and the Court's Future, will air tomorrow night at 8 o'clock on KPBS 2. You can also catch it Friday night at 11 o'clock on KPBS. A major announcement from Governor Gavin Newsom aimed at curbing climate change. California will stop sales of new gas-powered cars and trucks by 2035.
You can still keep your internal combustion engine car. You can still have a market for used cars. You can still trade and transfer those cars. We're not taking anything away. We're providing an abundance of new choices and new technology, being agnostic about how we get to zero emissions, but being committed to getting to zero emissions by 2035.
The governor says the proposed rule would cut greenhouse gas emissions by 35%. Existing state rules mandate that a percentage of new car sales must be electric or zero-emission vehicles. The mayor's office is opening up an auction for utilities to bid for a multi-decade energy franchise agreement with the city. But as KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani tells us, some community members say it's a sweetheart deal that leaves taxpayer interests behind.
On two separate occasions, city council members could not agree on how to set the terms of the franchise deal.
I'm going to vote no, and I'm just hoping that we find a better way to value what we have, which belongs to the people.
But Mayor Kevin Faulconer said he would go ahead with the bidding process. In a press release, the city is asking a utility to minimally bid $80 million for this multi-billion-dollar contract. That's an increase from the previous number, but the agreement doesn't include some provisions council members and advocates asked for, says Matthew Vasilakis of the Climate Action Campaign.
The poison pill in this agreement is the removal of the right to purchase clause. That was our biggest accountability tool, and it's gone now. So if this bid moves forward, we will be trapped with SDG&E the same way that we're trapped with 101 Ash.
Vasilakis is referring to the tall skyscraper downtown that the city purchased for millions of dollars. It was once owned by SDG&E parent company Sempra Energy. A franchise agreement for SDG&E that lasts 20 years and has no accountability clauses would be the same, he says.
The mayor is heading out of office, and he's crafted a sweetheart deal for his friends at SDG&E. A deal that puts SDG&E interests ahead of taxpayers.
But City Energy Manager Lee Friedman says the city could still take over SDG&E's infrastructure if it wants to under law, even though the provision isn't in the deal.
The city at any point or time it doesn't have to wait for a material breach of the franchise. It doesn't have to, wait until there's a cause for forfeiture. Under the law, the city has the opportunity at any time to start the municipalization process.
Deputy Chief Operating Officer Eric Caldwell says the proposal presented will hold the winning utility much more accountable than in the past.
The franchise agreement that's proposed has infinitely more enforcement capabilities than the existing franchise agreement. The old franchise agreement did not have an audit provision, and we now have one proposed that would have a public-facing audit every 2 years.
Still, some community members like Vasilakis says those audits will not have any teeth. They say they will try to block any agreement with the bidding utility when it comes up for vote at City Council. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
The Padres development team that put together Petco Park will now take over development of a parking lot near the ballpark. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayers says the construction at Tailgate Park could disrupt the large homeless population in the area.
The proposed development would cover a 4-block area in San Diego's East Village neighborhood. The Padres plan was chosen after the city's selection committee and external experts reviewed 2 top bids for the site.
The Padres have done an incredible job of creating an atmosphere of fun, of excitement and energy at Petco Park, and they are a great community partner.
The initial vision for the site is a destination that includes housing, public plazas, retail, and office space. Additionally, the plans include green rooftops, additional parking, and capacity for Padres watch parties and live performances.
As part of our overall vision for this site, we're actually going to add 600 parking spaces beyond the 1,000 that are here right now. In a new state-of-the-art parking structure, 1,600 spaces available for the use of Padres fans and San Diegans when they come down to enjoy the city-owned ballpark.
The new development is expected to bolster the economy in East Village. But many people who are experiencing homelessness use resources in the surrounding area.
I'm hoping that some of the initiatives that are happening now currently within the county and the city to house homeless will really address a lot of that.
The next step is to take the selection committee's recommendation to the city council. If approved, a final agreement with the Padres development team is expected to happen by mid-2021. Jacob Ayers, KPBS News.
The San Diego County Board of Supervisors dropped plans to convert a hotel in La Mesa into housing for people experiencing homelessness. The board voted to withdraw an application to the state's Home Key program. It would have provided funding to convert a former Holiday Inn on Parkway Drive into housing for more than 100 people. The La Mesa City Council voted against it, saying they feel the project was imposed on them. Senator Rand Paul and Dr. Anthony Fauci went head-to-head during a Senate hearing on the coronavirus. The Kentucky senator claimed New York City had the virus under control because of herd immunity, not restrictions. But Fauci was quick to correct him.
They're no longer having the pandemic because they have enough immunity in New York City to actually stop.
I challenge that. Senator, because I want to, please, sir, I would like to be able to do this because this happens with Senator Rand all the time. You were not listening to what the director of the CDC said, that in New York, it's about 22%. If you believe 22% is herd immunity, I believe you're alone in that.
The most optimistic view of herd immunity is that 60% of the public would have to have COVID antibodies in order for the disease to stop its spread without any type of restrictions. Saying thank you, that was the message behind an event today in Balboa Park. The Spirit of Liberty Foundation and the San Diego Air and Space Museum kicked off Operation Thank You, a relay in the sky today. The event is a tribute to healthcare professionals and first responders during this pandemic.
It's more than a thank you. It's lifting their spirits. They all believe people care. But the fact is, sometimes you need to hear it loudly.
The relay itself will take off tomorrow from San Diego International to 98 cities across all 50 states, then ending in Washington, D.C. on October 30th.
With high pressure in control, our quiet weather pattern continues. Sure, we'll have some fog and low clouds as we head into the overnight hours and into our early morning. Other than that, no rain chances. Temperatures, they're going to be turning slightly cooler as we're wrapping up the week, only by a couple of degrees. But as we get into next week with a large area of high pressure building on in, that's going to help those temperatures go up. Large look here doesn't really show much of anything across California and the desert Southwest. All of the active wet weather farther to our north in the Pacific Northwest, where places like Seattle and Portland, that's where they're getting some much needed rain. Here, though, we are dry. We have some of those low clouds and fog developing, especially along the coast and into some of the valleys. 65 in San Diego tonight. Oceanside, 58 for us. You head into Mount Laguna, we're dropping back into the mid-50s. Meanwhile, Borrego Springs, low to mid-70s for our lows tonight. Into our Thursday, things stay quiet, heating up into the interior, but along the coast we'll still have a bit of an onshore flow, keeping things a little bit more comfy. 79 in San Diego with some afternoon sunshine once we get rid of the morning fog. 89 in Escondido, Ramona Arizona topping off around 93 for our Thursday. We head into the end of the week on Friday. We'll still have that onshore flow, keeping things cooler along the coast, the heat into the interior, until Monday, when we see those temperatures shoot up. Lots of sunshine staying in the forecast. Temperatures into the mid-80s for our highs along the coast as we start off next week. Inland, we go from the upper 80s close to 90 to end the week into the mid-90s by Monday. The National Weather Service is considering issuing heat advisories and excessive heat warnings as we get into parts of next week. Into the mountains, we make it up into the low 80s by the time we head into our Monday. Notice that forecast staying dry with lots of sunshine. And as we wrap things up in the deserts, close to 110 as we end the weekend and head into early next week. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Adam Del Rosso.
The Society of Wonder suggests that every backyard contains a secret portal to an underground kingdom of inspiration and hope. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando has more on Animal Cracker Conspiracy, the latest in La Jolla Playhouse's Without Walls or Digital Wow Festival.
Animal Cracker Conspiracy taps into the history of puppetry as a means of conveying political messages under the radar.
You have the possibility to comment and say things that humans can't necessarily get away with saying. It's something that's kind of considered maybe for children or not seen as something that could potentially have a dangerous message or political message or social message. And so it's been able to kind of hide in plain sight and comment and do things for centuries.
Bridget Roundtree and Ian Gunn are the creative artists behind Animal Cracker Conspiracy, a San Diego-based puppet company. Their latest project, the Society of Wonder, just launched online as part of La Jolla Playhouse's Digital Wow or Without Walls Festival. Gunn describes it as
a mysterious series of 5-minute videos that introduce you to 5 unexpected characters who are brought together through coincidence, serendipity, and happenstance to form a society that reflects or is empowered by their gifts, their uniqueness.
It's a production that's arisen out of quarantine and the inability to get exactly what you want when you want it. So the pair made everything from what they had lying around the house.
So what we want people to experience is the wonder of what our human imagination is capable of in terms of taking crude and easily accessible materials and turning them into a story, creating a world out of that.
A world featuring a gallery of puppet characters.
They're carved wooden heads. They have a torso that is suspended so it can turn, so the shoulders can turn. The hands of the puppets are on rods. So any puppeteer could actually hold all 3 rods, the central rod, the 2 arm rods in one hand and manipulate that with manual dexterity. So when we were first developing this film, we did a lot of the shots where I would literally be holding the iPhone in a DJI Osmo Mobile 2 gimbal and puppeteering all with my other hand. But description of the puppets, they really kind of came out of a kind of comic book ethos. Carved the heads out of styrofoam, and Bridget and I paper mache'd them, and she added in texture of vintage newspapers. There's actually words and language like embedded into their faces and into their arms.
The puppets have a retro feel, yet also seem to be from a world very much like our own.
So it's an alternate reality, but it relates to a lot of the issues that we're dealing with environmentally, socially, and politically. Definitely with an absurd tone, and that feels very timely right now.
Helping to bring this alternate reality to life is Margaret Noble.
I list myself as sound designer, but there's many elements to sound design. Sometimes it's composing sounds, sometimes it's recording sounds, sometimes it's collaging and cutting up sounds. But essentially it's putting together lots of little tiny pieces to make the world come alive, the visual world.
Creating a brave new world through puppets can be liberating.
If you're doing live action, realistic sound, you're very focused on being as accurate as possible. But here, there's no boundaries. Any puppet could make any sound. Any world could make any sound. Sound doesn't have to be literal, and often it's more interesting when it isn't, and it's symbolic or expressive, and it has a little bit of darkness and mystery.
There are multiple mysteries to discover with each episode of the Society of Wonder. So sign up to be wowed by the latest entry in La Jolla Playhouse's Without Walls Festival. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, an officer involved in the police killing of Breonna Taylor is charged with endangering others, but no one is charged for causing her death. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Here's a recap of today's top stories. In downtown San Diego, protesters are demanding justice for Breonna Taylor. Today, one officer was indicted in Taylor's case 6 months after 3 officers opened fire inside her apartment, killing her. They were serving a late-night warrant at the time. Officer Brett Hankison is charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment, but not with killing Taylor. We've reached a new milestone for COVID-19 testing in San Diego County. We've surpassed 1 million local tests. Also, just one day after learning we are staying in the red tier 2 for now, cases ticked up slightly, 278 new ones along with 2 deaths. And the Padres development team that put together Petco Park will now take over development of a parking lot near the ballpark. The proposed project at Tailgate Park would cover a 4-block area in East Village, which would include housing, public plazas, as well as retail and office space. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us and have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.